More than 140 dead and some 200 wounded is the latest death toll from yesterday's attack, which occurred just before the start of a concert at the Crocus City Hall in Krasnogorsk near Moscow. According to witnesses, several men armed with automatic weapons and flamethrowers entered the building. There was a series of explosions and a fire, resulting in the collapse of the building's roof. There were 5 or 6 of them. They just walked in and fired. But they didn't shoot into the air, they didn't shout, they didn't say, "Lie down or we'll kill you." They just walked in and shot at everyone methodically in silence. The sound echoed, and we couldn't understand who was where. The attack in Krasnogorsk was claimed by the so-called Islamic State. The United States has stated that there is no reason to disbelieve these declarations. Moreover, Washington, D.C. already had knowledge of the planned attack several weeks ago. A relevant warning was sent to Moscow. Earlier this month, the U.S. government had information about a planned terrorist attack, potentially targeting large gatherings, including concerts, which prompted the State Department to issue a public warning to Americans in Russia. The Russian authorities ignored the warning. Perhaps they did not give it credence, or perhaps they did not want to prevent a tragedy at all. Now the Kremlin is trying to exploit the massacre of its own citizens. Moscow is trying to link Kiev to the attack. Vladimir Putin has stated that the terrorists intended to flee to Ukraine. The terrorists were moving toward Ukraine, where a window was prepared on the other side of the border for them to cross. They were all arrested. Already in the first hours after the attack, former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev spoke in a similar tone. If it is established that they are terrorists of the Kiev regime, it is impossible to deal with them and their ideological instigators otherwise. They must all be found and ruthlessly destroyed as terrorists, including officials of the state that committed such an atrocity. This attitude was to be expected. After last week's presidential election in Russia, Vladimir Putin may once again focus on the war in Ukraine. For the past few days, the media have been speculating about another wave of mobilization in Russia, which could involve up to 200,000 citizens.
This is war. We have to be smart. Direct us with their narratives and their stories.
From the get-go, Kiev has categorically disassociated itself from any connection to Friday's attack. Let's be clear, Ukraine had absolutely nothing to do with these events. We are dealing with a full-scale, total war against the regular Russian army and the Russian Federation as a country. And no matter what, the fate of Ukraine will be decided on the battlefield. Regardless of who pulled the trigger in the Moscow concert hall, it is clear that the Russian government will try to use the tragedy to unite the nation around its Tsar. Experts do not rule out that the attack was inspired by Russian services. Putin has already reached for similar ploys in the past. Let's remember that Putin came to power as a result of a series of provocations. That is, when he was prime minister, the Federal Security Service of the Russian Federation organized a series of terrorist attacks. This was the case, among other things, in 1999, when the Federal Security Service of the Russian Federation planted explosive devices under apartment buildings in several Russian cities to provide a pretext for launching the Second Chechen War. 3 years later, Russian services inspired an attack at the Dubrovka Theater that killed more than 170 people.